$90, quiet, up 3/100s, gold's at $12.60, for $961.60, oil's trading down to $100
Hey bird friends, it's time for Avian First Aid, episode 8. This episode is also about bleeding your bird's toes and legs.
Toes and legs would be the second site that we would commonly see bleeding from, and that usually happens when one bird has landed on another bird's cage and the bird inside the cage doesn't like the intruder, and he reaches up and he bites the foot or toe of the offending bird. It's usually, as far as assessment, very, very easy. There's usually blood on the perch. You may even be able to see the lesion without picking the bird up. If the bleeding has stopped, then your assessment is how much blood has been lost, and do I think my bird is in danger from blood loss? That's your initial assessment. If you think it's in danger from blood loss, then you're probably going to want to do hospital cage, supplemental heating, and you may even want to do a little bit of that before you decide to pick up your bird and bandage the area. When the cut is on the foot or the leg, usually bones and tendons aren't involved. If your bird is still perching on it, then likely you don't have a fracture. But if you see a bone or a tendon protruding, then probably you want to just stabilize your bird and get it to the veterinarian to get further attention. If it doesn't have those things, then you want to make sure that your bird is stable enough to be handled, and you do that by assessing his stance and how much blood is lost. Once you've determined that you think that he is stable enough to be handled, you would catch him in a towel, and you want to clean the blood off. Usually what happens is you can't really tell what part of the foot is affected because they walked in it and there's blood all over and you don't know where the cut is or how many or how deep. So what you need to do is clean it up first. And what I'll often do is just run a tap really slowly and just hold the foot right under it. Because if you scrub on an area, then if they had a blood clot there and it had stopped and you dislodge the clot, it gets bleeding again. Whereas if you just let the water run over it, it takes longer, but then you can see where the cut is, how extensive the damage is, etc. If it's still bleeding a little bit, use cold water, because cold water will make the blood clot more quickly. If not, you can use warm, because that's more comfortable for the bird. So now you've got your bird, you've cleaned it up, you've assessed that there is a laceration on some part of the foot. You don't think that it's bad enough that it needs to go anywhere. I usually recommend bandaging them because they do tend to chew at broken nails or cuts on toes, and because they're on their feet all day, they tend to get contaminated with fecal material and get potential infections. So once I've cleaned it up and I see what it is, I would have some of my antiseptic, either I usually rinse it with that first, then dry it with gauze, and then wrap the offending area. If it is just a toe, you can't put a bandage just around a toe because this part's fatter than this part, and the bird will grab the end of it and have it off in about 2 seconds what you just took half an hour to put on. So what you need to do is wrap it around the toe and then up around the ankle, and it ends up being kind of a ball. It's usually a good idea to stuff the bottom of the foot with a gauze or a cotton and then wrap the toes around it. And the reason is that if the injury, in addition to causing bleeding, has caused any damage to the tendon, then when the tendon heals, if it heals scarred down to the bone, then you don't have use of this toe anymore. It's not going to open and close. So you want it healed in the open position that would sit on a perch, not in this position, because then when he perches, it's going to sit on the knuckle, and that part of the foot was not designed to take pressure. So just in case you get tendon tie down later, you want to bandage it in perch position so that if when you take that bandage off, all the cuts healed and everything, but the tendons aren't gliding well, then at least they can set on the perch and that toe isn't going to be stuck underneath and cause a problem. Obviously, if you think the leg is fractured, you may want to stabilize it prior to transport. Most birds are pretty quiet, and if they're not in a position where they have to try and keep their balance on the way there, they're fine with that.